Next up, we have DeMarvin Leal, the defensive tackle out of Texas A&M, who, for me at least, was an interesting guy because, earlier in the draft process, I had heard people talking about him as though he was a first rounder, but by the time I got the film on here, a little bit closer to the draft, it seemed as though people had sort of soured a little bit on Leal, which is interesting because, you look at some of the traits, I think they are by and large positive in terms of the athletic intangibles. We're talking about a guy who had like a 5 flat 40-yard dash, just for example, right? He had a 7.2 3-cone time, a 4.49 shuttle. These are all very impressive measurables for a interior defensive lineman. We're talking about somebody who on film this year, in terms of the statistical production, 8.5 sacks, double-digit tackles for loss. I thought that there was a lot of good stuff that he showed at times, but on the flip side then, after having put on the tape and, got into my evaluation myself, I sort of see why he slid a little bit, because I thought first and foremost, in terms of, is he better as a pass rusher? Is he better as a run defender? I sort of thought he was pretty balanced in terms of both areas, but not necessarily overwhelmingly positive in either. I gave him a 14 out of 20 as, as a anchor against the run, and just being able to play his gap. One thing that I will say that was a little bit questionable is that he was used all across the Texas A&M front, whether it was stand-up edge, 5-tech, 3-tech. He had a lot of edge reps, so maybe that's sort of influencing my view on him, right? And if I saw more reps inside than anything else, I'd have a slightly different opinion. But from what I saw, the way he was used, I didn't think he always did a great job anchoring at the point of attack. Obviously, that'll be a concern, though, when you're only 283 pounds, especially if you're going to be even a 3 technique, right? We always want these quick, twitchy guys in at 3 technique. That's light for a 3 technique still. So I would say maybe it's less so something technical that he's necessarily doing wrong in terms of an inability to anchor, but I would say he just needs to put on more weight and strength. One measurable that I didn't mention was his bench press reps, and at the combine he did 17, which was in the bottom 10% of all DTs in the history of the combine. So I think that gives you sort of the picture of the type of guy we're talking about here, right? So more explosive than he is strong, I'll say. Not as big, but he's decently quick, and I thought that helped him out. I gave him a 12.5 out of 15 in terms of his explosiveness and first step. I thought sometimes he could be a little bit inconsistent with his get offs, for example. I thought that whether that's a snap anticipation issue or whatever that is, I thought that could have been improved. But if he's able to channel that 5 flat 40 on a more consistent basis, and channel the 1.7 to 10-yard split, etc., right? Just that first step, that initial burst, channel it on a more consistent basis, and I thought we'd see even more production than what we did. I gave him a 14.5 in terms of his pass rush ability. I'll be honest, I like like I said, I like some of the traits he offers, but it felt like there were just some things that he struggled with. It felt like, for example, he wasn't always rushing with a plan. He had good hand usage at times, and would have these really impressive splash plays, but it felt like on a play-to-play basis, in terms of consistently generating pressure, I'm just not sure that it was there. It felt like he was good in that regard, but not necessarily setting the world on fire. And for me, I would say a good portion of his 8.5 sacks, I didn't see them all, obviously, in the 250, 300 snaps that I watched of his, but it felt like they were maybe more motor than anything. I gave him a 7.25 in terms of his motor. I thought that was generally positive. So maybe not as many just pure clean wins as you would have hoped for, but I thought maybe some later developing stuff in terms of his motor was there. In terms of some of these other notes that I had, I thought he had, in terms of the frame, I will say, because a lot of my notes pertain to just his size and those quote-unquote concerns. I think he has a workable frame to where you could put on weight easily, and he already has a strong, powerful lower body. You could just tell by looking at him. He's not a guy that would have a very high body fat percentage, I can't imagine. So in that regard, I don't think it should be an issue for him to put on weight. It's just something that I think maybe has to happen if you want him to be sort of an every down guy who is a stalwart against the run, for example. I don't know if that's going to be there at 283, DeMarvin Leal, right? I thought he did do, I will say, a good job. Now this is gonna sound a little bit in contrast to what I've said, but one of my notes is with him playing so many edge reps, I thought he actually did a decent job setting the edge on the outside. He's better anchoring against a tackle than he is on the inside, where he's seeing double teams, for example, right? Or he's seeing these guards and centers who are able to get up under him and really motor him off the spot. Whereas at tackle, it felt like he was maybe better able to use his length to his advantage and kind of sit on these reps better outside than inside. Now, the problem is on the flip side, one of the top negatives that I wrote is just not enough juice to consistently generate pressure off the edge. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there in that regard, where it's like, as a run defender, I'd rather him be a 5 technique. As a pass rusher, I think he probably needs to be inside. So it's just a little bit tough in terms of a fit. I think he'll certainly be a 3 tech, but I think at that you're kind of admitting that there's some areas of his game that maybe aren't up to par. Some of these other grades I gave him, just very quickly here. I gave him a 4.25 out of 5 in terms of finishing and tackling. I thought that was one of the big reasons that he had so much production in terms of his stats, I should say. The ability to finish, right? The ability to, turn some of those, what would have been pressures for some of the other defensive linemen that I watched in this class, to turn those into sacks and actually get your guy, in terms of the quarterback, on the ground, or even the running back at times. I thought he was a decent playmaker. Like I said, those splash plays were there. For me, it's just the play-to-play consistency that needs to continue to improve, and hopefully that continues to become easier and easier with the more size he puts on. So, all in all, with that being said, that's pretty much all I have for you guys in this one. The only other grades really were 3 out of 5 in terms of his leverage. I thought he needed to do a better job staying low through the rep. I thought on contact, he could be in a solid position at times, but I would say as the rep continued, it felt like he just kept getting higher and higher, which is natural, but I thought he was making things a little bit too easy at times in terms of getting upright as the plays persisted. So, all in all, came out to a 71.75 raw grade, 74.62 when you consider positional value. And for me, that puts DeMarvin more so in round 3 than anything else. But if you're a team that thinks like, hey, we can coach up some of these weaknesses, we can help him become better at stacking and shedding against the run. We can work with some of these physical tools that we have here. He's a 22-year-old guy, right? He's not one of these redshirt seniors or anything like that this class is full of. If you're intrigued by that and you're a defensive coordinator, obviously a head coach or GM, I think that, back half of tonight, day 2, maybe into early day 3, I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind that at all out of Leal. And I think if you can get him in like round 4 or into round 5, I know sometimes defensive linemen, it's interesting to see where they actually end up going. Because last year, a couple of the guys I had say 3rd or 4th round grades on, they were really slipping. So it's interesting to see just exactly what teams are considering on the inside. But I think that if you're considering the traits and some of the flashes, he's probably a guy that should be going, I don't want to say late round 2, early round 3, but you could, there's times where he flashes first round tape. I'll say that. So if you get him, in the 3rd round, get him in the 4th round, those are certainly great areas. Early 2nd round, I'm a little bit more hesitant to buy in because I think there's some stuff he needs to improve at first, but at the end of the day, he should be a pretty solid guy for any team that's short on the interior of their defensive line. So with that being said, if you thought this was a solid video, if you enjoyed just hearing me generally talk about DeMarvin Leal and what he brings to the table, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I'm curious to hear. I'm sure most of you guys are here after your team took him, so tell me, what are your thoughts? Where does he fit on your team? Do you think that maybe putting him alongside some of your other personnel on the inside, is that going to help him? I certainly think that will. That's one thing to say, is that he was pretty easily the best guy on that Texas A&M front, at least from what I saw. So if you put him in the NFL and you pair him with a dominant defensive tackle alongside of him, or a flamethrower off the edge alongside of him, I think that's only going to make his job easier as he attracts less attention than he did in college. Kind of like Green Bay did in round 1 in taking Devontae Wyatt and pairing him with Kenny Clark. If you're a team who has a solid defensive lineman but then wants just another one that maybe has a high ceiling, I think DeMarvin Leal could certainly be a good pick there. And that's all I have for you guys in this one. I'm mic'd up now. I'm mic'ing out. Peace, guys. I will see you next time.